Okay, this is a little video to help you use up all of your hardwood flooring. So I've been doing the upstairs bedrooms in my house, doing the hardwood flooring, and I'm on the last one now, the master bedroom. So I've already got some practice on the other three, and I also did 2 rooms downstairs years ago. Over the years, I have purchased more of the equipment. This year I bought the hammer. When I did the downstairs room, I bought the finishing nailer. And I had rented or borrowed those equipments in the past. But I knew that I was going to be doing a lot of flooring, so I bought more equipment now. What I've also done in the last couple of rooms is I have laid out all of the wood, not all of the wood, but I've laid out several boxes of wood. That's about 4 boxes in length, just increasing length, so I can access a particular length rather easily. This is a little different than what you might call the normal way. The normal way is to actually lay out several rows of the flooring that you're going to be nailing in, staging them. And the reason to do that is if you have 2 people basically working on this job, and one person is just running the hammer and the other person is laying out the wood, the one person can feed the wood to the nailer almost continuously, and you can get the room done in a minimum of time, potentially in a single day. And that means if you're running the hammer, you don't have to pay for multiple days. But since I bought the hammer on this, because I knew I was going to be doing 4 rooms, I started doing it a different way with just a single person. And in this way, I don't lay out the courses ahead of time. And one reason I do that is because I select the pieces so that they come up to within 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch. In this case, the baseboard is 1/2 an inch. So if I come up within 1/2 an inch, it's going to be covered. So I don't have to have the exact length. I can more or less put down boards at random until I get to the last one. And when I get to the last one, then I need to pick one which comes within 1/2 an inch of the wall, okay? And then I don't have to cut it. In the old way, I would have to cut, and then if you only had to cut, let's say, 1 inch in order to make a particular row, you might say you did a pretty good job. But then you end up with all of these little pieces, okay? And here's an example where I had a lot of little pieces. I would just use these to play with while I was adjusting the pressure on the compressor. And I was practicing how to put in some of the nails with the finished nailer. So in this technique, I'm on the 2nd floor, so if I go down to my saw to cut, I do that in the garage because I don't want all the sawdust to end up in the house. I could do it up here and then try to clean up all the sawdust, but honestly, this technique, it probably won't save you any time if you're really good at picking that last piece. You see, if the difference between the wood is fractions of an inch, like if they're within 1/2 an inch of each other, then you can pick one without cutting that is going to make your row. Occasionally you'll end up where you won't have that, and you either need to bring up another box of wood or you need to reselect one of the pieces in the row in order to get it. Now, after I do 20 square feet of wood, I can then bring up another box. This number of boxes of wood, which is probably about 4, I'm going to be able to pretty easily select that last piece so that it falls within the length that I want, and then I can bring up another box. Until I get to about 80% or so, then I noticed that it might not, I don't have as much selection. And then I might have to cut, like I did in the last room. But even when I do that, what I do is, I don't select it so they end up cutting off just an inch, because that's wasted. What I do is, I set it up so that on the last board, I would set it up so I cut it so that there's at least more than a foot left over, because I just use that piece as the starter on the next row. Okay, and that way, even though I do have to make a cut, I still don't end up wasting any of the wood, because I just use that piece as the starter for the next row. And I just keep going like that. And it's, like I said, it doesn't really save any time, but it makes for one person job, it makes it quite doable. It turns out I don't want to do that much work in one day anyway, because I get tired. Now, while I'm here, I can show you just a few other details about the job. You can see a lot of videos online about doing hardwood flooring. The first course, you can see you need to use the finish nailer, because you can't get that nailer. It bumps up against the wall. Okay, you can't do the first row. You can't even get the second row in, okay? Before, but on the second row, you can use the finish nailer if you place it at an angle. And you can practice that. And you can put that right in through the tongue. And that's not going to secure it as well as this hammer, but it will still work fine. Now for the second row, what I do is I select the board so that they're nice and straight. With this hammer, it's powerful enough so even if the board has a little bit of curvature in it, because you're putting a lot of force in it, you actually straighten it out as you nail it in. But when you're using this one, it won't have the force to do that. So you have to make sure that the second row, for example, is nice. The first row has to be perfectly straight, and so does the second row. And you just selected those pieces to be nice and straight, to have no warp on them at all. Okay, and then that makes that easier. Here's an example where I practiced nailing it into the tongue. It's going to take a different pressure on the compressor in order to drive that to the right distance. And in my case, it turned out what I ended up using with that finish nailer is 120 psi, which is the maximum for that nailer. And I'm using 1.5 inch nails, which are maybe a little bit on the short side, but they seem to work fine. Here's a little detail that you can see, and this is just undercutting the jambs and the trim so that the hardwood will slide right onto them. Okay, and I undercut all the way into the hall. Now, I'm only doing this room right now, but later on when I do the hall, I can start from here and work my way right out into the hallway. Okay. Here's another little detail. It's in the closet here, and it's turning the corner. So here, I undercut this. It comes in here now. To finish up in here, here's a case where you have to use the so-called reversing strip, because now you have to actually turn the pieces around the other way, and then you build them in this direction. Now you will get into a small corner like this. You're going to have to face nail more than you normally would, and that's just because it's a constrained space. So I may not be able to use the air hammer. I might be able to get it in for one, and then I might have to use the finish nailer at an angle, and then I might have to face nail two, something like that. But it's inside a closet. Nobody really sees that anyway. I did have to face nail this down simply to get it rigid. Now, technically, I probably could have put a cleat in here and then used the power nailer up against the cleat. I could have then pulled the cleat out. I just didn't bother to do that because it's in a closet. Yeah, nobody really looks in a closet. I did have to do that. Here, I could have done the same thing here. I could have put a cleat down, but I didn't bother. What I find is that when you're doing the floor, you pay a lot of attention to a lot of little teeny things, but then when the floor's in, you don't get on your hands and knees to inspect it. Another little section I was going to show was here. Here's another doorway. This is where it goes into a master bathroom. Now here I undercut the doorway, but in this particular case, it's going to go to a floor that has a different height. Right now it's got linoleum. I might end up putting tile in there. I didn't want to undercut this all the way across because I'm not going to be putting 3/4 inch flooring underneath this necessarily. So what I did with this, over time I've noticed after cutting these jambs that the way this jamb is constructed is out of 2 pieces. Now in this case, I was actually able to undercut here, and this piece here, you can just put a little chisel and just slice that off. So I was able, for example, here just to undercut the half that I needed to. I can worry about what happens over here when I get around to doing the flooring in there, okay? And I did the same thing on the other side. Another thing that I wanted to point out that I did notice in doing this job has to do with this space underneath where the wall board hits the floor. Now, there's a gap there. That could be a 1/2 inch, or maybe a little bit more. When they built this house, what they did was they filled that with some sort of, the dirt compound, the mud. And what happened is, over the years, it just cracks. Because when I take the baseboards off and cleaned up, I end up having a lot of cracked pieces. And I just sweep them up. Now, I wasn't quite sure what to do with those. In the earlier rooms, I just ignored it. But then I started realizing that underneath that, there's a 2x4, which is the plate of the bottom plate of the wall. And I noticed there was even a gap between the subfloor and that 2x4. Now you can see, I don't know why that wasn't as true as it should have been. That should have been nice and flat, but this is an exterior wall, so there's going to be some leakage, air leakage to the outside. So in this case, you can see I caulked that. And I'm pretty happy about that caulking. Now, the wall board also has to meet up against that same 2x4. And there could be another little gap if the wall board didn't meet perfectly against that. This whole area is an area where air can get down. And, it's possible, for example, to caulk this gap here. Just ignore that whole thing until all the flooring is in, and then caulk it. It's even possible to ignore it, put the baseboard on, and then put caulk on the baseboard, the top or the bottom. So there are a lot of little ways to caulk all that up. But I think it is a good idea to worry about that. There was another section here. This is actually an interior wall. I'd run out of caulk. So what I did was I just put more, did have some joint compound. So I put joint compound in there. Now you can see there that it shrinks when it dries. And because that gap was relatively large, it's already cracking. And nobody's even walking in the room. So that doesn't work out great. But that's going to all just get covered up, so it won't really matter. But I think the caulk is better, does a better job. Even on the interior walls, when you have leakage, the air, leaks into the interior wall. But then the warm air rises up and it goes up to the top of the wall where it leaks into the attic. And so there is heat loss and moisture gets into the attic as a result of all of these little gaps. Normally, I wouldn't have time to worry about anything like this because, but now I'm retired, so I have more time to worry about all the little details. So let's see, I think that's everything that I wanted to show. The main thing was just to show you how to use all of the flooring without ending up at the end of the day with a bucket, a basket of just a lot of these little pieces, 1, 2, 3 inch, whatever, that you really can't do anything with. Okay? Thanks, bye.